Okay. All right. Well, welcome everyone. We really truly welcome you to this webinar. Um, my name is David Shemansky. I am with Phoenix Consulting. And before we start, I just want to kind of go over some Phoenix Business Consulting overviews of what we are, what we offer, what products that we have, how we can service you. As you can see, Phoenix Business Consulting we have plus 250 customers. We are a premier provider of all SAP products, and that's considered, with consulting services, integrations. So we offer a very, very wide range of software products as an overview. We have over 250 plus customers, and we're located all over the globe, globally, and we work with engagements with the public sector and the commercial enterprise. So we're focusing truly on Concur, but just know it's Concur in many other things, everything related to SAP. So this next slide that you do see kind of shows you kind of an overview of all the various different things. And one key thing to be mindful of is that we are a gold partner of SAP partners, and we can deliver a suite of products and have a very, very strong presence in the United States and globally. All our consultants, we have at least a minimum 10 years of experience. And I'm here to talk to you about Concur and how it can help you with some of your setup, some of your implementations, and some things to think about as you go through your journey. It could be a phased journey. It could be a full implementation. It could be parts of an implementation. So in addition to all the SAP products, S/4HANA, SAP SuccessFactors, analytics, as you can see, there's a lot that Phoenix Consulting is very heavily consultative services that we can help you with. This next slide is, and I promise there won't be too many slides after this, but this is an overview of what Concur Products has. So many, many years ago, probably back in the early 90s, is Concur, bread and butter is travel and expense. And then from there, it blossomed out to many other types of services that we are now offering, such as invoice. What goes with invoice is purchase requests. Some of the products and services that we offer service is the GSA travel allowance, per diems. So if you're going to have some type of integration that you want, a per diem or a travel allowance, we have a linkage with the US GSA travel allowance for the United States, in addition to any other countries. So some of the things just, to point out is, working with integrations as it relates to a single sign-on. Multi-country deployments. That is kind of what this topic is today, is about policies and why we have multi-country deployments. What does a policy do, and what's the best way to implement that, or things to think about? Most of you on here is either a professional or a premium client. That's the more of the build of the implementation. And some other things here, these extended services that Concur has is intelligence, Concur Intelligence. We offer analytics, we offer intelligence, and then Concur Consultative Intelligence, where you actually have a dedicated person that can build some of these reports for you. TripLink. TripLink is something that captures the reservations in travel. It brings them right into Concur. And you can link that with TripIt Pro if you're utilizing some type of travel component or travel request. Locate, due diligence, especially with the public sector or higher education, is they want to know where their students are, if they are safe, So this is where it can locate, and it can communicate with all the employees to make sure of their whereabouts and make sure that they're safe. Expenseit Pro, some of you may or may not be aware of this, but Expenseit Pro is a OCR technology. It's a phenomenal tool to use. think of yourself, you're out there in the field and you have your phone with you and you're doing an expense report and you have a dinner and you take a picture of that receipt. That receipt will go through an OCR technology and it will link that receipt to your Concur profile. And essentially it's creating that expense report for you. So take that picture of that receipt, take the receipt, throw it away, and then the receipt image of that comes right into your profile, and it will meet all the requirements based on your what the word is. What we're going to talk about is policy. So some of these things, just want to highlight some of the various different things that Concur has. Concur request. Sometimes that terminology can get thrown around because is it purchase request? Is it travel request? So the terminology is a request, and that's pre-authorization for spend control. You want to know before someone takes a trip, in the budget, is this in your budget or is it out of your budget? And there's many workflows that can coincide with that to make sure that you are in your budget. Company build statements. CBS is like we like to call that, and that's managing the P card. Not like invoice, this is a purchasing card. Purchasing card is high volume, not so much necessarily a high rate, but just high volume. And it will create these reports and put them into a statement report for you based on a frequency. And then you as the user having that purchase card will go in there and all these expense types are already in alignment with the statement report. Over here to the right-hand side, we have audit services. We have Concur Detect. We have different types of reporting services. So essentially, it's an overview of not just travel and expense any longer. It's the whole encompassing of all the various different products that Concur has. Some of you may know me from my past. Some of you, hopefully we can have relationships going forward, but this is essentially just a little bit about me, of where I've been and some of the different things that Phoenix Consulting can help you with. So just as a little introduction of me. And then what are we going to get out of this meeting today? What is your expectation? So what we're going to be covering today is a policy. That's a primary configurational point within Concur. We'll talk a little bit about that. A configuration relationship diagram. Think of this as the blueprint of your system. It doesn't matter if you're in pharmaceuticals. It doesn't matter if you're in manufacturing. It doesn't matter if you're in higher education. All the different industries, it's based on a global template that Concur works within. And then we tweak that based on your business requirements. And when we will talk about this Concur global template, so you're actually privy now to see some of the inside of how your site could be configured, and take away some things of, hey, how is my site configured based on this? Am I utilizing best practices? Is there something maybe from this, hopefully this webinar, that you can take away that you may be thinking of, hey, I can do this in the future? So I'm trying to have this to be a very interactive webinar. So your questions, anything you have, raise your hand. We have Derek, we have JL. These are our moderators. They'll be able to field some of your questions, or you can raise your hand. So I want you to just consider a lot of different things. And then things to consider about deploying what a policy is. My question to you is, and anybody can answer at any given time, is a very basic question, but what is a policy? So in your vision, in your terminology, in your past, what is a policy to you? What does that mean to you?
Compliance.
Compliance. I hear compliance.
Yeah.
Yeah, compliance. Sure. Yeah. Policies, compliance. What else? Rules, regulations, governance, a policy. You have a travel policy. You may have an HR policy. You have an expense policy. So, common sense, I would think that's what a policy is too. We've all heard the term policy before. However, that's not what a policy is in Concur. And guys, this is a gap between you, the customer, and Concur or a consulting company is that word policy. Because as you just mentioned, compliance, you're thinking rules, governance, policies. Um, Policy in Concur is more like, think of it as a container of configuration information, and that includes certain things. So it's a container of things, and those things have certain components to it. Those groups are linked to a policy. So you in your own company right now, you may have 10 groups, you may have 4 groups, you may have 25 groups, you may have 1 group. Why do we create a group? What's the rationale, reasoning of groups in Concur? The reason why we do create groups, it's the differential, meaning what is different between this group and this group? Do I have a VIP group that maybe sees different expense types? Or do they have a different type of workflow? Or do I have a group called relocation, maybe for relocation reasonings, and they want to have some type of different workflow? So anytime you're creating a group within Concur, it's essentially what is different between this group and in this group. So that's kind of focusing on the groups. The group can be assigned to a policy. You can assign one policy to many groups. Now, if there's 3 things, what I would really love for you to take away from today, if you could, on a piece of paper, if you have it with you, just write this down. Write this acronym down, FEW, F-E-W. F equals forms, E equals expense types, and W equals workflow. And more importantly, the policy supports all the governmental statutory regulations. So here is a policy, essentially. This is your policy. And what is in that policy? It's your form. What is a form? You have a report header form. When you're creating your expense report for the first time, you're signing in, that's a form that you're looking at. It's the visualization of creating that expense report. Within that policy, you have various different expense types. And then lastly, workflow. These are the 3 major components that make up a policy. So as you can see, policy has nothing to do with rules, regulations, or compliance, or anything like that. So I always believe it's better showing you than just telling you. So in this site, this may look familiar to some of you from some of your sites that you have configured with Concur. What I'm going to do is I'm going to proxy, that's a terminology. I'm going to proxy in as a person. And I'm going to create an expense report. And I want to show you the differential of what these different policies, what these policies truly mean. So this person signing in, they're going to click new. Now, depending on what you've purchased, depending on what your role is, you could have an expense report. You can have a travel request. You can have an invoice. So it depends on what you've purchased. It depends on what you've been implemented. In this case, we're going to start a expense report from an end user's perspective. So you notice right here, the word policy is the very, very first thing that you see, and it has the little asterisk right there, and it says Phoenix policy. This user that I signed in as, I could click this little drop down and go to the Canadian expense policy. So this is one group connects to 2 policies. So if I'm filling out this expense report header form, here's my policy. Billable is a question. I'm going to say, yes, it is billable. And then it's going to drive, who are my customers that I'm billing this to? This is what we call a conditional field. If my answer was no, it's not billable, then the customer will not show up. So this is from our last segue, we talked about forms and fields, but we want to put the name of the report. The date will default to today's date. And then this is your financial information or your cost objects, logical systems, company code, cost object type, and cost object code. So in other words, this information is in your employee profile. And what it did, it copied into the report header. And then if I had any projects associated to this, I could select a project based upon your business requirements or your gathering of that. And then it asks a question, do you want travel allowance? So in this case, I say no, I do not want travel allowance. So I am in this Phoenix policy, which is US centric. And then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna create this report. So when I click create report, it's gonna give me an opportunity to select the expense types. So all of these expense types are from the United States. So I'm going to select breakfast, for example. And then it's going to ask me to fill out some information. What is the transaction date? Business purpose is not required. Vendor name is not required. City of purchase is not required. The amount is. So if I just say maybe $10, I'm going to save my report, or my expense type, I should say. And then I go about my day and I can keep on continue on because this individual is in this policy. Watch what happens when I go to this report details and I decide, hey, I made a mistake. This is not in the US. I need to change this. So it's going to give you an opportunity to change this to the Canadian expense policy. Now pay attention to the travel allowance and pay attention to any of this other financial information, because once I click into this policy, it appears differently. Because why? This is a form. This is a report header form, different information. So I can still fill out this information. I am now in the Canadian expense policy. What is Canada? What is any other country in this world? VAT, value added tax. The United States is one of maybe 5 other countries in this entire world that does not have value added tax. So that same breakfast expense type that I selected has a little bit different information because now the business purpose is required. The city of purchase is required. And more importantly, it's taking my Canadian currency, converting it into my US currency, and it's asking me for a receipt. Now, this is not a receipt like you're used to saying I need to attach, a $25 receipt to an expense type. This is relative to that. And the user didn't have to think about it because they were in the right policy. So policy dictates functionality. It defines the workflow. It absolutely defines the different expense types. And you assign a group to a policy, or you can assign policies to many groups. How Concur and Phoenix Consulting, how we build this is you're going to get a tour now of more of the back functional side of this. And it's pretty interesting because when you have this exposure, when you have the unrestricted access to your own system, you'll see travel request, you'll see expense, and here is invoice. We're going to focus on expense for a second. And I see a hand up. Lisa, did you have a question?
Oh, I did not. That was from earlier. Never mind.
From earlier. Okay, cool. All right, good. All right. All right. So when Phoenix Consulting is building your site and working with you, we're looking at these primary and secondary types of configurational points. Policy is one of the biggest primary configurational point that we have. So clicking inside of the policy, the global template, a little bit of history before we just get into this. This global template was created probably, maybe 20 years ago from Europe. And we wanted to keep things consistent, keep all the statutory requirements consistent with all the policies. And then throughout the years, it evolved to what it is right now. So we have Phoenix policy. If I come over here and just navigate over here to the right-hand side, and I look at the expense types, these expense types are linked to the Phoenix policy. Notice the forms, and you see the word non-VAT, as you should, because the United States, the Phoenix policy in this case, is a non-VAT country. What is VAT? Why do you need to have VAT? Well, city of purchase is absolutely a required field for VAT, and it's looking at your profile, and it's determining the VAT calculations in a tax administration. So city of purchase has to be there because that's kind of what starts the VAT configuration. And a business purpose must be required. So just looking at this, you see the United States has non-VAT. Let's take a look at Poland, right? Because we got big companies out there. You might have different types of, other countries that you're deploying, right? So if you do happen to have one in Poland, if I highlight Poland, come over here to the expense types over here, you will never see the word non-VAT because Poland is a VAT country. They're doing a reclaim on all their expenditures. So the global template that Concur works within has all these pre-configured countries. Now, do we have every single country in the world? No, we don't. No, we don't. We've got a good handful. We have about, 40 of them. And as they're growing, we're always adding in to the global template. So question is, what if you had a country here, Brazil, for example, and you were deploying Brazil? It's not in here, right? So what would you do, or what would you have Phoenix do, is we could take any other country other than the United States, copy that country, because when you copy a policy, you are inheriting everything about that policy. If I take the Phoenix Phoenix policy and click modify. So remember the first question I asked, what is a policy? And I said, few, forms, expense types, workflow. Well, here is the name. That's the name of our policy. That is the expense report header called Phoenix Report Information. Here's our workflow. And then down below here, it's not required. If your company does allocations, cross-charging, distribution, you're cross-charging or distributing your financial information, your cost objects, you're allowing that to happen based on your expenditure, well, that's a form. However, that form, as you can see, is not a requirement. So if you decide, I don't want my folks to do any allocating, whatever their financial information is in their profile, that's good enough. We don't want them to make any changes. Then the answer to this question is none. And that would give you the ability, or lack of ability, I should say, for them never to select an allocation. Some clients do allocations, some clients do not do allocations. That's where we need to determine your business requirements. So everything in red is primary. And some things just to point out to you, not all, because this would take days for us to really get into the granular part of the policies, is some things such as missing receipt affidavit. If you decided as a company, my folks are using this too often, we don't want to do this any longer, go into the policy and uncheck it. And they have no access to the missing receipt affidavit or the declaration. My opinion, this is just my opinion, my recommendation is you need to be very guarded and cautious about this, because if people, you think about it nowadays, where can you not have a receipt? You lose your receipt, at the gas station or at the hotel. What do? You call up the hotel, they email it to you. If you are hiking and you are at the gas station and you happen to leave the gas station and you left the receipt there, that's justifiable. That can happen. As a matter of fact, I know it has happened. It's happened to me before. And you need a missing receipt affidavit. So that's where this can come into play. My suggestion is, though, the approvers need to do their due diligence, and if they see a pattern developing, then they need to either reject it or come to a policy change. Sometimes this could be beneficial, very beneficial. Sometimes this could be looked at as a loophole that someone's utilizing this, too often. Had a customer one time activated travel allowance and activated in both policies, and it caused a little bit of a hiccup, but it was a simple click is coming right into here and disabling travel allowance. So the policy, I heard some people chuckling, I think I know who those are, but that's exactly what happened. And it does happen. Mistakes are going to happen, and you can just go ahead and control that policy. But the main three things in a policy is your form, report header, workflow, the routing of which you want this to go to, and your allocation form. So if you have, maybe you're bringing on a new entity, maybe you have a VIP group, and you want them to have a special workflow outside of what the regular folks are doing, or visually you only want them to see a certain amount of expense types, or visually on the report header, would be a good justification of creating another policy. And folks, there is no limitation to the number of policies that you can deploy. There is none. However, you want to focus on the guidelines that make it manageable and flexible, because the more policies you have, that's the more management you have to work with them. So lastly is how this links to a group, because as you can see, Phoenix policy applies to Canada and the US and the Phoenix group. Going back to the linkage is in the group configuration. So when we're talking about 2 policies or 3 policies or how many policies that you want, Concur, Phoenix Consulting, whoever's doing your implementation is going to come in here and they're going to look at this group, and they're going to come over here and then they're going to navigate to the right-hand side, and they're going to look underneath the word policy, and essentially, what policy do you want this group to be attached to? It's attached to Canada, and it's attached to the Phoenix group, and it's defaulted. So this user is attached to one group, however, having the ability to select, more policies. Another recommendation is, consultative recommendation is, you got to be careful about that, because sometimes you're putting the power in someone's hands, and what if they select the wrong policy? That has happened. And because if you select that wrong policy, that policy is attached to certain type of expense types. And those expense types link to certain forms. So it all kind of comes together like a real big puzzle. So just going back to the PowerPoint real quickly, is just want to drive home, policy is not rules, it's not compliance, it's not governance, it's forms, expense types, workflow. And this here that you see before you is called a configuration relationship diagram. So in other words, this is how your site gets configured. High level. There's only one person, there's only one Lisa in this world, right? She is linked. Lisa, you are linked to a group. You cannot be in 2 groups. You can only be in one group. This is a one-to-one relationship. You can only have one ledger. We can build an accounting code ledger. We can build a hierarchical type of ledger. We can build 10 ledgers. We can build as many ledgers that you need, but you can only be in one. You can only be in one country. You can only reside in one group. Localization is the language pack, what language is your profile and what country. But more importantly than just these orange one-to-one relationship linking to the user is look where this group and look where it falls down into. And it's right in the middle. And that is your driving factor. That's the power of the policy. And what does this policy link to? What does it attach to? Everything in blue. Here's your expense types. Here's your entry forms, entry fields, report header fields, workflow, allocation forms, and other things. But the main component is the forms, the expense types, and truly the workflow. So kind of wanted to wrap this up is overall, policy helps controlling the cost. It increases your efficiency, and it provides a better experience for your users. And it all driven by the policy. So I'm going to open this up to any questions that you may have, and you can put it in the chat, you can raise your hand, however you want to do it, perfectly acceptable. If you have any questions regarding what we talked about, please ask.
All right, Dave, so I have a question for you.
What is that?
All right, so this kind of goes back to VAT. That we have some users that have VAT in, let's say, EMEA. And some of them have tax receipt. When they have a transaction, they have a tax receipt.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when you have a tax receipt, in some cases, they do not want the user to reclaim it for specific expense types like entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
How would you configure that based on the policy?
Well, that has nothing to do with policy, Lisa. That truly, I'm gonna sidetrack for a second, but it's okay because that's a great question that you have. That has nothing to do with that. It's tax administration, and that will be another reoccurring webinar that we will talk about too as well. But where you're controlling that is in here. I know this has nothing to do with policies, but I think it's a very good question that you had. So what country in Europe was that were you referring to?
Italy.
Italy?
Yep.
Okay, so Italy is here. This is the beauty of the global template. These are pre-configured, predefined expense types already done in tax administration. So as you can see, they're linked in groups. Unlike groups that I was explaining, these are expense types: laundry, parking, reduced rate, reduced. So all these expense types that you see are here are lumped into a VAT configuration. So the percentage of that reclaim here is 100%. So not to get too confusing with this, because this is not really a VAT or tax administration. If your question was, how do you move that? You would have to take this, whatever it is in here, move them into a different bracket, and that's how the VAT would get reclaimed. That has nothing to do with policy. That's in the tax administration in the reclaim group.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a great question. It's a great segue to future topics that we want to talk about, because that is, we're all in the US, but we all have deployments all over the world. So that's a very, very heavy topic.
Story of my life.
Anything
David,
else? Yeah.
There's a question in the Q&A box from Joel Novak.
Right. Where is the question? Or can you just read me what the question is?
If one policy is assigned to many groups, how do you firewall so that those groups don't see each other? Information and reports are separated based on the group.
Wait, so I'm sorry, repeat that question so I can understand it. again.
How do you firewall so those groups don't see each other's information and reports are separate based on the groups?
So the groups are segregated from policies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's a very smart thing to do, and that's one of the things I always recommend to do, because it's right over here in the group configuration. So in other words, if I want to take this US group, come over to policies, I am telling the system this US group is only going to be active and defaulted to the Phoenix policy. I am not going to activate it. I'm segregating it from any other policy. So in other words, if I wanted to segregate it from Canada, I would unclick that. So now this person in this US group is only going to see US centric expense type, US centric, forms, and it has nothing to do with the other policy. And I do recommend doing things like that because that's a one-to-one match. It's foolproof. There is no mistake. Because when you do put the power in folks selecting policies, you do run the risk of them selecting the wrong policy. Then it would be up to the approver or the AP processor to reject that report and have them start it all over again.
Mm-hmm. There's a second part to this question, which I don't understand, but Joel said we create or purchase a separate policy for every group, which can be a lot of dollars. So
No, it's
this
not.
is
I know where
not
you. I
correct.
know. Yeah, I know exactly where you're going with that. So this question was from Joel. Joel was asking this question.
Yes, Joel Novak. Yeah.
Okay, so Joel Novak, ask yourself this question: what are the three major components in a policy? That acronym, FEW, forms, expense types, workflow. So you always want to think about that when you're talking about policy, because does it require a different workflow? Then yes, it justifies having another policy. Is it going to be the same expense types? Is it going to be the same report header form? So if your answer is yes to all these questions, no, you do not need to have another policy. Because if you look, guys, if you look into the policy, there's 30 plus policies to maintain. Streamlining it based on forms, expense types, workflow, that will always set you straight, so you always will know it doesn't need to have another policy. In all actuality, if you did a global rollout, honestly, you could do it with 2 groups and 2 policies. As crazy as that sounds, it can be done, because you would have VAT and non-VAT. VAT would go to a VAT country. Non-VAT would go to the United States. That would never happen in real life, but I have seen customers with pages and pages and pages of policies. Frustration and frustration and frustration, because they have to manage and maintain these policies. And a lot of those workflows, expense types, and forms, they're already in these different policies. So it's just understanding what a policy can do. And then from there, kind of go backwards and see if you can lump it into either one, or in this case, Canada is VAT. So that has to be in its own policy. This is CBS, that's company build statements. That's its own policy as well. And then Phoenix is its own. So that's US. As you know, all these other policies are dormant. They're not being activated. And all of these policies support all the statutory requirements. So lastly, let me just show you, I always like to show first, let's take Czech Republic. And let's look at what's active or inactive in a typical Czech Republic in Prague. So these are all the very basic expense types from our global template that are active. And then you'll come down here that are inactive based on that country. I could take a different country and they may have different active or inactive expense types. So it's based upon the country's statutory requirements. Any other questions? All right.
Lisa has a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dave, so I have a question. So then what really, if we go to the bottom line here, what is the dividing factor that makes a company want to create a new policy? For example, we have at our company, we have multiple users in a Germany policy that have multiple users from different countries. So,
Well, wait, let me stop you right there. You have multiple users in a German policy.
Yep.
And then you have multiple users in what other policy?
No, just multiple users in one policy, but these multiple users are from multiple countries. So in the Germany policy, we could have, let's say, Italy, we have, let's say, part of the UK, that kind of thing, right? So what would the company want to take some of those users out of one policy and put them in their own entity, their own policy?
All right. So the question goes back to Lisa is, do these people have the same report header form that they're visually looking at?
Report header form, they will.
Okay. Are the expense types going to be visible for all of those people?
They will.
Okay. And most importantly, Lisa, is the workflow, is the routing of that expense report, whether it be complicated or natural, is that going to be the same?
No.
Okay. Okay, that's your question. That's why, because technically we could build a workflow condition, but that's getting into something a little bit different. But you just answered your question, because workflow is the reasoning why you want a different policy, because forms, expense types, workflow must be in a policy. So if you're looking at my screen, here's a policy. There is only one report header form to select from. There is only one workflow, and there's only one allocation. I can't put two workflows in here. I can't put two report headers in here. So if the differential is because of the workflow, then yes, that's a justification of creating another policy.
Okay, yeah.
But you could have, I mean, honestly, you could have Germany, Italy, Poland, France. You can have all those different countries, and if they're all the same, just call it international policy. It doesn't have to be, Germany. Just call that, because you can lump it into one policy, and that's less policies that you have to manage and maintain.
And one of the other questions that came up while we're going to be taking some of our Italy users out of the Germany policy and putting them into their own separate Italy policy is because we have this other thing called CapEx that one policy doesn't use versus the other.
Italy, for example, here's Italy.
Yeah.
Italy is going to have these active or inactive expense types based upon the government of Italy. What's their statutory requirements right in here. So there's nothing stopping you from creating an expense type and putting it into this policy and just make it active for that policy.
Right. Got it.
Now, Lisa, what you're asking is some very, very valuable questions. And this is something that Phoenix can do and I really recommend that a lot of folks just think about this, is doing a complete consultative reviewing to optimize your existing Concur setup. And that's a site review where we can go in and look at your system, talk to you about what you want, what you don't want, what makes sense, and how to clean up your site. And is it really being optimized, and is it really truly being efficient? We can offer those services. We can do site reviews, we can do trainings, we can do various different types of things to make sure that you're utilizing the best utilization of your system, because some systems are not. They've been configured 20 years ago and they're just configured as they were, but things have changed and evolved throughout the years. So that's something, if you're ever interested in doing that, we can get information out to you, because we do site reviews, we do all various different types of, trainings, and we can tailor that for your optimization and really unlock a lot of different productivity. And you want to know what? It's cost savings. That's the bottom line. It's cost savings. And you're making yourself more self-sufficient. So If there is no other questions, I have a little bit of a challenge for everyone, if you'd like to take it. I'm going to go ahead and launch this. And this is a polling question. And the question is, I'll read it out loud. What are the 3 main things in a policy?
Number 1.
I'll give you about maybe 15 more seconds. That's pretty impressive. 91% got that right. One got it wrong. Not necessarily wrong. It's because the word policy always thinks of rules, governments, and regulations. But very, very good from the beginning. And look where we ended up with 91% achieving that high-end result. So congratulations. So I hope everyone found this informative, a little bit engaging and fun. And, I'm going to go ahead and on my PowerPoint, I do want to show you one last thing. Can everyone still see my screen where it says thank you?
Yes.
Okay, cool. There's a little QR code there. If you want to scan that code with your phone, there's some topics there. If you want to hear any new topics that you want to come up with or think about for the future reoccurring webinars, more than happy to look at that. We'll prepare for that and have more of an engaging type of webinar going forward.
Thank you.
So